Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're back for another Frequently Asked Questions Friday. So we're back with another Fact Friday. Hope you're doing marvellously well. It is, of course, the 4th of July holiday for those of you that are in America. And we are doing a big sale, a worldwide sale on a lot of our courses. So please check that out. There will be some sales of courses and of course membership to the Academy, which is a big deal. The Academy is a place that we created so that we can all share ideas. I spend a lot of time in there myself. I critique mixes, we comment, there's live chat in there, there's a whole bunch of great stuff. So don't forget to check out the Produce Like a Pro Academy. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. You can go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list, get a whole bunch of free goodies. If you haven't already, please check out the Drums in a Castle video we did this week, because you can download drum samples and the session, and they sound pretty darn good. So please do that. Okay, we got a bunch of great questions this week, and the first one is this. I've been seeing your full painted EB3 bass hanging on the wall for a few months or so. What is the story about that? Well, it's here. It's not actually a real EBO. It's made in Japan, and I believe it was an Ibanez. And yes, it is very authentically painted. Actually, I didn't realize how authentically painted, because I knew it looked like the original Eric Clapton / Todd Rundgren, I believe, who now owns it, SG. And I knew it looked a bit like it. And then, I don't know, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I went online and compared a photo of Eric Clapton's original SG full guitar, and it's pretty darn amazing how close it is. The guy that did this did an absolutely incredible job. I recently had this set up by Norik Renson, and it's pretty fantastic. He repaired it completely, and so now there's a way you can dampen. I can take the spring up here and put foam up against the strings and get a super dead Carol Kay kind of classic tone. It's a really good bass, but it is a bolt-on neck. It is not a glued-on neck, but it's fantastic. And, you know, in your arsenal, I highly recommend you have at least, the session bass players I work with would call it this, like a curveball bass, something a little twisted. So let's say you've been hired as a bass player, or, you're a producer and you have a couple of key instruments, like a precision is a pretty much go-to kind of bass, and maybe one with round wounds and one with flat wounds. It's also nice to have just something a little strange, something like this, or a Hofner, or, a Hagstrom. I've seen all kinds of random basses that bass players will bring, and it's a great idea to have. We've been asked about this, and we talked about this before, because sometimes it just needs something completely different with a totally different touch and sound and feel that just makes you look and think differently about the track. So that's one of those basses for me. How do you manage to run a studio, an academy, and a YouTube channel, and keep your sanity? You seem like a kind of person who doesn't let any kind of stress bring you down. So I wonder, what is your way of dealing with it, and what do you do when things don't go as planned? How do you manage to keep your cool? Well, I'm certainly not perfect. I actually got really annoyed about 2 days ago because I can't remember what we were trying to order, something, and things were getting forgotten, and it went to the wrong address. It was going wrong, and I was like, I swore, and I was sitting next to David, who knows me very well, and I think it's the first time in 5 years of knowing him he's ever heard me use the F-bomb. And I was pretty stressed. Or I wasn't stressed, I was pretty annoyed. But the reality is I try not to lose my cool. I do get blunt. I think it's exactly the same thing we talk about with production. It's like knowing how to communicate with people in a normal, everyday manner, showing, compassion and understanding, and then when it's important, just be blunt. Sometimes you just have to go, no, do it like this, or try that. And if you can get to that place where you can be straightforward and honest with somebody, it will save you exploding, because you're not sort of like grinning, gritting your teeth and going, no, that's okay. It's understanding balance, and it's understanding giving people respect, but then realizing there are certain times you just have to kind of put your foot down and ask for what you need and be really straightforward. I think that that is what keeps me sane, is that I'm able to do that and mix it in with the right amount of humility and respect. And that's really a big part of it. I try not to ever let ego get in the way. Now, all of us have egos. It's a human being. It's part of what we are. But I do realize that the reason why I started Produce Like a Pro, as you fully know, is like I wanted to get past that sort of elitist, backslapping kind of mentality. We feature a lot of people, for instance, on YouTube that are successful. We also feature a lot of up-and-coming people, and we'll continue to do more of that. And then sort of everybody in the middle. I don't just have a channel of like, I'm only going to feature the most famous people to keep my views high. That's really not what I'm about. When we interviewed Tommy Vaccari, I don't think I'd ever seen him in a video, and yet it's Tommy Vaccari. I mean, he's Quincy Jones's engineer, and that was an amazing kind of conversation. There's so many people like that I'm amazed have never, been showcased. And so for me, it's that same motto that keeps me going, which is basically humility, be a worker amongst workers. Don't think that there's anything remarkable about what I do. When I'm looking up to people like Tommy, like Shelley, like Jack, I feel like I'm standing on their shoulders, and then they feel like they're standing on the shoulders of other giants. So for me, how can I know any more? So humility is key. Humility is super, super key. And not think that you are, better than anybody else. And if you can do that, then your ego won't get in the way. You won't get as frustrated. You won't feel like the world owes you something. And frankly, I get to do what I love every day. Today, we went over and hung out with Butch Walker for like 3 or 4 hours. I mean, Butch Walker. His resume is amazing. He's super humble, and he's stupidly talented. He's like, picks up the guitar and plays great, and then goes, well, I'm not really a guitar player. And I'm thinking, if you're not a guitar player, I don't know who is. And he plays piano beautifully. He plays, drums. He's an amazing songwriter. He's a singer, obviously. He's had a lot of success as a solo artist, as well as obviously the band he has, Marvelous 3. Then like a week before that, we had Roger Manning, who's coming up in a week or two. An incredible keyboard player who was in one of the most important bands of the 90s, Jellyfish, which in Britain in particular really influenced many of us to do Britpop. And, these are like guys that are really stupidly talented, and they have multiple layers of talent. They're not just an engineer or a mixer or a mastering engineer or a songwriter. They're like all of those things. And they're not just all of those things, they're really good at multiple things. And they push themselves, and they're still big kids, and they're still learning. So my point is, if when you're hanging out with Roger Manning or Butch Walker or Jack Douglas, it's pretty easy to just keep your humility down, not let your ego get carried away, not feel like, that's the big deal for me. So I get stressed. I have bills to pay. I have things to do. But ultimately, I make money doing what I love. And that is an insane blessing. Not that many people can say that. Not that many people can say they get to pick up a guitar every day and write songs. And today I tracked acoustic guitar, bass, electric, and worked on a track as well as interviewing Butch Walker. How good does it get? So, if you look at it like a blessing, you're always going to win, and it will temper your, exhaustion or your frustrations that we get from time to time. Now, I want to point out something specifically that you asked, which I think was really good, because we're just talking about the stress and the work and humility. All these things are important, but this is a line I really liked. What do you do when things don't go as planned? Nothing ever goes as planned. Everything I do, there's always a snag. And after a while, it becomes life. And I remember the days when I first started getting busy doing projects. And I remember when something didn't go as planned and there was a problem, it could derail the whole thing. Then I started another project and 3 things didn't go as planned. And then another project and then 5 things and 10 things. And after a while, you start realizing that the way things go is they don't go as planned. And that's just standard. You know, if I arrive somewhere, like today I arrived 10 minutes before, I was 15 minutes before anybody else. And David got there 45 minutes after we start time. So what am I going to do? Be like, you know, the point is like, that's life. You know, schnizzle happens. And there's much worse things like that happen, like, you know, mixes, things get erased, you know, audio this, that, and the other, pieces of equipment break when you're trying to make a deadline. I had this console go down on a Sunday with a delivery date on a Monday for Black Veil Bride's Alive and Burning Blu-ray DVD. And I had to have all the mixes sent out for mastering on Monday morning. And on Sunday, we were doing the recalls and we couldn't get it to work on a Sunday. And Bruce, God bless him, Bruce from Desk Doctor came out. He was at a wedding. He was at a wedding with his wife. He took my phone call and he drove out here at like 4 in the afternoon and fixed it. So if that's not going like planned, I don't know what is. You know, it's, you know, we had old Ace Frehley album, the last Ace Frehley album we mixed. We were recalling the mix for Ace. He was driving from San Diego, about 2.5 hours drive away, and he was going to get here for 1 p.m., I believe. And we were recalling the mix. Turn everything on. Console doesn't come to life. It's like, oops. So again, call Steve. I believe it was a Sunday again. And this time, Bruce's partner, Steve Roach, drives out. He comes out immediately and he literally finishes with about 5 minutes to spare, fixing an issue. And then Ace walks in, I introduce them, you know, they talk for a few minutes. And the point is like, we've always made it work. Those are very stressful situations. I've had even more stressful situations. I've had things go down in a studio. Here's a good one. I was doing, The Fray did a cover of Happy Christmas, War Is Over. And this was right after the first album. So they are massive. At that point, they were the most downloaded artist on iTunes. They had How to Save a Life had downloaded 4 million copies back in a time when downloads of 4 million was just like unheard of. So we're in the Palms, a great, great studio in Vegas. And it was, of course, being Vegas, there was a massive heat wave. And for some unknown reason, they had some like brownouts. It wasn't the studio's fault. It was some Vegas thing. And the AC went off in the control room and the console started to overheat. And with the console overheating, it's an older Neve, I think the VR series, I'm blanking on the name, they run really super hot. All of the headphones stopped working. So I had no headphone sent. The band's arriving, then a kids choir come in because we're cutting the thing live. And I'm getting tones from everybody in the band, testing all the vocal mics with no headphones. They've got speakers in the room, you know, so I'm talking through the speakers and I'm like, yeah, we're just getting some setup on the headphones. And I did this for 3 hours. 3 hours until the wonderful assistant, Mark, who was the assistant there, got everything up and running with the AC, you know, whatever the power cut had caused. I can't remember the exact thing, but, you know, it wasn't their fault. They got the AC back on and finally the console cooled down, headphones came back to life. And so for 3 to 4 hours, I had to get everything up and running, ready to go, without the band ever hearing themselves. So Ben is there, getting drum tones, and all I'm doing is speaking to him through the speakers. I am not going to be like, oh, guys, panic, panic, panic. The headphones aren't working, because that would have just freaked them out. So I think when you ask how you deal with the stress, it's necessity is the mother of invention. If you're thrown into those situations, you have a choice. You can be like Mr. Frickin' Dramatic and be like, oh my God, I can't work under these conditions. The headphones aren't working. How am I going to get tones? Or you just figure it out. And the band never knew that there could have been no headphones. And like I say, little kids arriving to sing along with the band. And I have no way of talking to anybody with a pair of headphones on, or for them even to hear themselves. But that's the way it goes. I can think of 50 of those stories, and every single producer and engineer I've ever worked with, especially some of the seasoned veterans who have been making records for 50 years, have 100,000 of those stories. They have so many of those stories. And that is what happens. You learn to deal. When you're younger and less experienced, or just less experienced, and not even an age thing, those things might seem like massive problems. I mean, I talk to people and I'm like, how are you? And they're like, oh, it's been tough. What's going on? And they'll tell me something, and I'll be like, you're gonna have to get used to it. There's gonna be problems all the time. There's gonna be issues. Things aren't going to go like you planned. It's gonna happen like that time after time. How do you handle it? That is the most important thing. And that's what keeps sessions running, and it keeps you, as you're pointing out, it keeps you sane. So anyway, hopefully that answered. And it would be a really good point if you have stories and experiences of your own that obstacles you've overcome that you've learned from, please leave those below. I love this kind of discussion. This is a really good topic. I'm not sure if you ever stated your opinion on coaxial monitors. Would love to know your take on them. One of my heroes is Dave Jordan. He and I made great records together. I learned a lot from him. He was a great mentor of mine. And he is a big fan of the Little Golds, which of course are the tannoys. And tannoy, I believe, own the trademark to the word dual concentric. I know H in England also called it dual concentric. And I think after a while, in Britain in particular, we call the coaxials, we call them dual concentric, although it's tannoy, a Scottish company's trademark. Anyway, the Little Golds and the ones that Ivana Manley does, those new boxes with the crossovers in them. I mean, those are pretty phenomenal. There's something. I am not an expert in this, but I will tell you the people I know that love coaxial speakers love them because everything is coming from the same place. It's not like a driver with a tweeter separately, or two drivers, a big one, a medium, and then a tweeter. All the sound is coming from one source. So the people that love coaxials love them and absolutely, worship them. And I do know that Dave Jordan made his best sounding records on the tannoys. So I like those tannoys. I had a pair. I think he had like 5 pairs. They had the Mastering Lab crossovers in them, which apparently is the way to get them. Those of you who know anything about the Mastering Lab will know that those crossovers were phenomenal. And that's Doug Sachs, for those of you who want to look him up. He was the man on the West Coast here. Everybody I know that ever worked with him just talks about him in an incredibly lauded way, of just like how incredibly talented he was. And then I know that Jack Douglas loved them as well. A lot of guys that I really look up to love those kind of speakers. I don't have a pair. It looks like I might get a pair because, a company we work with is producing some. So I think if you've got a pair and you like them, I don't blame you. They're pretty phenomenal. And tannoys in particular are really great speakers. How do you deal with creative blocks? I have been having some ups and downs lately, more on the downside. I've been having no motivation to do anything musical lately, writing, mixing, etc. You seem to do pretty well with everything that you have going on, clients, travel, YouTube, etc. How do you manage to keep it together and keep the creativity flowing? Okay, so this is a fairly similar question to the other one. The first question obviously is like, how do you deal with juggling so many things, and if things go wrong, how do you deal with it? This one is just as important, and it's like, how do you keep the creativity? I think I am blessed, like most creatives and most artists and musicians, I'm a little ADD. If I'm not doing 5 things at once, I'm not doing anything in my mind. I'm not very good at I can't just watch TV. If the TV's on, unless it's an absolutely incredible movie, it's quite likely I'm going to be reading BBC News and looking up and watching a bit of the movie and reading the news, and then probably making notes of things. I'm a note taker. If I like something or intrigued by it, I'll make notes. I may never go back to those notes, but by the act of making a note, it makes it important. It's hard for me to not feel creative because I'm always challenging myself. And I do remember being young and getting bored when I was young. And I remember not liking feeling bored. So that's when I realized I needed to be doing a lot of stuff. And so I think for me, I always maintain creativity because I've got lots of different ways I can express myself. I could watch a video and critique it. I could read a blog and critique it. I could write a blog. I can write an outline for something. I can write to people, answer emails, answer messages, but most importantly, I don't get bored because my idea of relaxing is playing guitar. I'm a husband, father, and guitar player. It's everything else comes from the fact that I play guitar. So like a day like today, we're working on a track and I get to play electric guitar, a couple of electric guitar parts, a couple of acoustic guitar parts, and a bass line, you know, as well as filming a video with Butch Walker. That's like a perfect day for me. And then I'm sitting there doing emails or reading some stuff and I'm practicing some scales, doing some finger exercises. So for me, I'm always in the zone of music making and music appreciation. I listen to Spotify, listened to a few records today. Somebody made a comment on a video, recommended an artist. I went to the artist and checked it out. I do read people's comments and comment, as you know. And if they have an interesting point to make and they are talking about a new artist, I'll go and check it out. I'm always running, you know, online business stuff, but I'm also always talking to artists about production. I'm listening to demos. It's like everything I do is about creativity. And I know it's difficult for some of you that want to be like me, but also have full-time jobs to pay your bills. All I can say is that when I did have a full-time job, like I worked in print for a small amount of time, for about 3 or 4 years. And I was obsessional about it. And I worked really, really hard in my teens and early 20s. And I made good money and I bought a house. And the whole time I was playing in bands and doing covers in the evening. And when I got into my like mid-early 20s, I went back full-time as a musician and got another record deal. I'd had a record deal as a teenager. I took those 2, 3, 4 years off, you know, being a signed musician and just played club gigs. And then I went back. And it was just like, I was always working in studios on my day off. I was always doing sessions on my evenings and it never stopped. But I felt like there was a part of me that kicked in, was like, I have to have a job and make money. You know, needed to make more money. And then I realized that there was more to life than that. And I took all that mindset and, you know, did music full time. So, you know, I left home at 16, played in bands professionally to about 19, worked in a print company from like 19 to like 22, 23, and then playing in club bands and stuff in the evening, and then got another record deal and did it all over again. It's always been the only thing I've been good at consistently is music, and the only thing that keeps me going. So I think the creativity question is really, it's just all I know. So I think that I understand the pressures of not doing music full time. So I think I would ask you the question, whoever asked this question, which is great, is like, are you finding that other parts of your life are affecting your creativity? It's tough. If you work a very stressful job and you come home, you may not want to go upstairs and fire up your DAW and start listening to your mixes. I understand. But that's why we have Produce Like a Pro Academy. A lot of people in there are professionals, a lot of them are semi-professionals, and a lot of them are hobbyists. But everybody treats everybody else equally the same. It's a big, big deal. So if you haven't gone there, check out producelikeapro.com and sign up for the Academy. If you want, just try it out 1 month. Try it out for 1 month. Do a 14-day free trial. There's about 50 plus multi-tracks in there. With all those multi-tracks, you mix it every month. Plus there's like, you know, all of the other 50, you can mix those. People will critique, people will help you. I will listen to the mixes that you do and I will critique them as well. It's a pretty amazing place. So check that out and look for the really supportive community in there. All right, Amazing questions. Lots of long rambling answers because the questions were pretty expansive. So I apologize if it gets a little bit hard to follow, but each one of those questions was like 5 questions within it. But it's always wonderful talking to you all. We're going to be in Abbey Road this week. So I'll try and do some stuff from Abbey Road. If I've got good reception there, I might just go on live. Who knows? But follow us on Facebook if you haven't already. Go to Produce Like a Pro on Facebook. And I'll try and stream in there as well. And I will try and stream in the Academy. And of course, our Instagram and all that kind of good stuff. And then the week after, we're going to be at NAMM, Summer NAMM. We're also teaching a master class at Blackbird Studios. So that'll be a lot of fun. We're working with an amazing artist called Jacqueline Clark. And then we're back. And we're doing a masterclass in October, which I haven't told anybody about yet, but it's going to be amazing. And we'll probably do another couple of masterclasses before the end of the year on mixing and stuff. So we have a lot of amazing stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Some great videos coming out soon. Some more stuff with Jack, which is always cool. And I'll speak to you all again very, very soon.